And thank you all for being here today. My name is Natalia Brizuela, and I'm a professor in the departments of film and media in Spanish and Portuguese, and I'm also the chair of the Center for Latin American and, as of this year, Caribbean Studies. Yeah, bringing in like the multilingual Caribbean. And I'm really happy to have Yina Jiménez Suriel here to continue a conversation that began between us about a year ago, I would say, right? Which is when we first met, when Yina came to the Bay Area in preparation for the exhibition at KADIST in San Francisco. That's 20th and Folsom, thank you. 20th and Folsom. You still have some days to catch the third iteration of this extraordinary project that Yina has. Is called the montañas submarinas, el fuego hace islas. How would you translate that into English, Yina?
Well, we did it when actually the show was in Brazil.
Yeah.
So we didn't pay so much attention to the translation in English. And it was raw, like from underwater mountains, fire makes silence.
Okay,
so it's
beautiful. Thank you. I didn't want to misrepresent, right? So Yina Jiménez Suriel is a curator and a researcher. She has a master's degree in visual studies. She has curated a number of exhibitions. The one she's going to be talking about primarily today is the one that's happening at CADIST, but as she said, it began in Brazil, and it has taken many lives. You know, it has many iterations across time and space and media, and that's one of the things that Yina is going to be talking about. She's also an associate editor of the magazine Contemporary and for Latin America and the Caribbean. Yina has also been part of, along with Beatriz Santiago Munoz, of a project of starting an art program, art education for emancipation in the Caribbean, and that has been, I'm hoping we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And this is also part of a collaboration that we've established with KADIST around this Yina's exhibition in supporting the publication of a beautiful book that Yina put together for the exhibition with a number of theoretical texts from thinkers from the Global South primarily, and that is one of the things that had initially spurred our conversation. So we'll be touching on that as well. So thank you, Yina, for being here. And I also want to introduce Joey Tang, who's the director of KADIST, who wanted, I think, to say a few words. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Joey Tang. I'm the director of KADIST San Francisco. Tell you a little bit more about KADIST. We're a nonprofit arts organization dedicated to global conversations about art and society. We support, through our contemporary art collections of over 2,000 works from over 110 countries, programs and exhibitions both locally in San Francisco and Paris, our two hubs, and internationally. Our residency program, which supported Yina, it's a way for us to support artists and also researchers, curators to deepen their research and to extend their network while they're here. I'm very thrilled to connect Yina with Natalia and the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies as one of the ways in which we think we can facilitate the conversations and extend our network. I want to thank Natalia, Janet, and Shalina of the Center for supporting this intellectual labor possible for the reader. Also, my colleagues in KADIST, Lindsay Albert was here, Shona May Finley, Emma Caitlin Cooper, Lauren Puritano, and Joe Malamud. The reader, it's really a follow the multi-year project that Yina will talk about today. It's bilingual in English and Spanish, and is published with many books from the Bay Area. It contains many first-time translations and writings. And Yina had offered us a really generous text that serves as a kind of visual field guide to really also experiment with the form of museum didactics. So in the exhibition space, to really facilitate the kind of putting attention to looking and sensing as a way to navigate artworks. Our conversation with Yina began in 2021, had taken various shapes and forms. including a residency in San Francisco, a residency in collaboration with Sao Paulo's Fuego and Art Center there, and also extends to Asian Art Museum, Cone-Shaped Top, which is a center for arts and music in Oakland, Museum of Contemporary Art and Design in Manila, which has a screening taking place maybe right now.
Yeah, like right now.
What
That
time?
you co-curated.
What time is it in
It
Manila?
was, I think it's already went out because it was 3 p.m. Manila time, so it's way.
Tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's tomorrow.
And also Delphina Foundation in London. So it's been a really long journey between institutions, between people, between artists, and I would characterize the curatorial process of Yina, and I would quote one of the great writer, Feliz Video Ducrube here, as a very, quote, result of a long, patient, and very slow task. One of those that sometimes seems useless because they are impossible, but at the end of the struggle proved to be effective. So I look forward to your conversation today, thinking about also how words and the convening could extend collaboration as we wind down our collaboration here in San Francisco. The book is in the back. It's $27. You can Venmo the publisher, but I'll have to take down your mailing address and have it sent to you in a couple of weeks. So afterwards, I will be right there. Answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Gina, I thought we could begin by, you wanted to show some images, right? From the exhibition and the thinking about the project. So maybe I'm gonna move over here so I can see. while you take over, and then I'll come back.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you, Natalia, for the generous introduction, and Joey as well. Janet and Julia for making up the conversation. And I want to also say thank you to Cross Lipka, which are over here, artists in the rotation 2 and rotation 3 in the exhibition here in San Francisco. And also Sholeh Asghari, which is an artist which was part of the Cicada, the fugue of the Cicada songs the past Friday as the launch for the publication. This has been a kind of many intricate project. So what I did was to do some notes that I will try to read in a pretty conversational way, to not miss, gave you a real weird introduction while we are looking at the images. The images are not in parallel to what I was saying, so you can either paying attention to that while I will be as this voice and off. In 2019, I formalized a research that I could fit the beginning of it in 2013, when I was halfway through my architectural bachelor degree. However, it was in 2019 when I decided to really formalize it by giving the title and starting to talk about what it is about. This transdisciplinary research, entitled The History of the Mountains, which is really in Spanish, La Historia de las Montañas, works in a very summarized way with 3 axes. Some of you already been hearing about this for many years now. So those 3 axes are how the human species builds imagination to manage life, thinking with and from contemporary emancipatory processes that cross all forms of life on this planet. And the third one, that is also a kind of intersection between the previous 2, which is the reconciliation with the constant movement. The complexity of the axis of work has defined in itself the rhythm of the research. And in that sense, I always say that it will take my whole life and more, with which I am extremely calm, because something key in all of this is that I am not interested in reaching a final conclusion or either generate like a truth. So for me, it's really like how I can rehearse through the research in itself. So the research appears in much of my curatorial practice, but it's not always there. Because of that, I always try to do the differences among I work as a researcher and I work as a curator. On many occasions, I do projects that are research that are part of the research itself, because I am also interested that the way to digest what I am feeling, thinking, doing through the history of the mountains is and should be always through a curatorial approach. Otherwise, it can be, I don't know, kind of ossified. However, there are many other projects that are, let's say, informed in methodological terms, but they are not necessarily from the research or linked to the research. And few others that, like, I think the ideas are not there, which is not necessarily, I mean, it's pretty a nuanced affirmation, because precisely if I am trying to something that I have like a real commitment with is how I can bring into my everyday life and into the everyday life of all the forms of life that are related to the research, and through the projects, like as a way to testing the hypothesis and the reflections in itself. So even when some projects are not linked to the research at all, through my own life practice, kind of, some things will be permeating those projects. In this sense, the history of the mountains is not only about the axis of the research, but the project is a device in itself to test the ideas of the research. So within these three axes, there are other more specific sub-axes. And so far, I have been working with two of them. I don't know if I put an image, which is we cannot almost see the diagram, but it's like like the many legs that has the research that I used to do it in, to try to keep in a logical way. So those three have these other sub-axes, and so far I have been working with two of them: the expansion of the perceptual system of the human species, and the ocean as the epicenter of contemporary emancipatory processes. And there is a third one that, in fact, it was the first that I started with, but in an act of pure good sense, I realized that I need to think about other things first to, at some point, reach out again into ephemeral communities, which is the name for that sub-axis. So the montañas, submarinas, el fuego, hace, islas is a project that is part of the sub-axis of the expansion of the perceptual system of the human species. And it is a project about things that move in the underground, underwater, and through fire, that sometimes break through the surface to influence processes of change that can be as abstract as those that have to do with evolution and expansion of the senses, or the domestication of our bodies. And it could be for things like a pretty practical as influencing or the catalyzation of strengthening of socio-political movements. When I received the invitation from Pivot and KADIST in 2021 to make an exhibition around the research, I decided to start from something that is visceral for me, which is beauty in relation. And maybe some of you are familiar with Poetics of Relation from Edward Glissant. So that is like when I am using the terms relation, is referring to poetics of relation in a way. So which for me is also how I approach the exhibition space. And this project is to relate many things. On the one hand, to put in relation communities that have been informing themselves consciously or unconsciously, in relation to processes of emancipation of the human perceptual system. And in that sense, is because of that, you have the first iteration taking place between Sao Paulo and Santo Domingo. And then this, the ideal scenario was putting in relation San Francisco with Manila, which is happening, and London with Lagos. But because of budget and because of time, it was really impossible to do it for now. And the things like in terms of Brazil and the Dominican Republic, when I was doing the research trip in January 2022 across many states in Brazil, I had a conversation with Eugenio Lima, which is an artist, researcher, and DJ based in Sao Paulo. And he told me about the fact that in the mid-20th century, in some Brazilian intellectual groups, they used to refer to the Dominican Republic as Little Brazil, which is like a due to the fact that within the whole Latin American and the Caribbean region, the post-colonial Latin American and the Caribbean region, both nation states were able to build and sell the narrative that they were racial democracies. Obviously, nothing further from the reality, even today in 2024. And of course, there are also some common issues due to dictatorial processes, and there is also something that I am really interested, which is the music. There is a cable that comes out of the karst soil of Santo Domingo, enters and crosses the Caribbean Sea to come out in the splash of mountains of Rio de Janeiro. And that cable is the funky carioca and the Dominican dembow. And I think from there, we can then think about putting in relation San Francisco with Manila, in also going through music, or as I used to say as well, sonic matter, which are connecting not only the Filipino diaspora in the Bay Area, but also other Southeast Asian diasporas that goes back and inform or come from Southeast Asia and inform what is taking place in the Bay Area. And again, not only through these cultural and artistic manifestations, but also through other many layers into the everyday life of all of us, that maybe we are not conscious of how those processes are operating, because again, they go through the underground in a way to stay away of the cooptation. And that is something which is, Natalia, you can also come on, jump in when you want.
I was just like, mesmerized by the images.
And so that is more or less like the methodology aspect, let's say, of everything that we are looking at.
Mm-hmm. Could you describe, Yina, you've gestured at a beginning of a description in terms of this began it was going to have 3 iterations, right? Mm-hmm. Sao Paulo, Santo Domingo, San Francisco, Manila, London, Lagos. But can you talk to us about how you conceive of this constantly moving structure, right? Mm-hmm. You've said you don't like something that's closed, you don't want a definitive truth, a closed exhibition that is like one thing that begins and ends, but it morphs and moves, right? So can you tell us a little bit about why you made that choice, Because I think the notion, we saw the word rotation, right? Mm-hmm. There were 3 rotations in KADIST of this specific instance in San Francisco. I'm not sure about Sao Paulo. And so the idea of the constant movement, relations, but can you help us understand what took you there and what you want out of that?
Yeah, well, what took me there, it was I think it's back in 2013 when I started to think on why through this through material and through materiality, we are either building in the same way, even if you are 2,000 above the sea level or 100 above the sea level. So what is going on that the human beings are really approaching some like a really different context through the same way, and how we can rehearse, starting from myself, because I cannot ask you to reconciliate with the constant movement if I am not. I mean, that is my way of thinking. It's like how I can really make that other people and other forms of life engage with these ideas if I am not able even to put it into practice through the projects and through the things that I do and through my everyday life.
And do you think that drive for movement, because it's interesting, you told us this all begins with the history of the mountains, and I'm fascinated now. I want to know everything about what is that history of the mountains. Like which mountains? Was it a specific history? As an architect, I'm like, what is an architect doing studying the history of the mountains? It's like it's so seemingly contradictory, right? And in the Dominican Republic, and we don't tend to think of mountains as something that moves. Yes. Right. Yeah. Yet that seems to be what gave you the research around the history of the mountains that I'd love to hear a little bit about, because it seems to be kind of the ground zero for all this. Yeah. Took you in the direction of necessary movement. And so it's very interesting how a kind of historical theoretical question, you have found ways to build a curatorial practice that reflects. It's not an application of a theory to like a project, but it's how that history and theory gives shape to something that refuses a shape. Yeah. And yet you have a mountain at the beginning. So can you talk a little bit about that seeming contradiction?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe another entry point to your previous question linked to this one is that it's also coming from like paying attention to the current processes, the current at that moment. I started to think about how this cooptation of the subjectivity is really moving forward. And it seems to be like one of the main frontiers for that, like to don't allow that cooptation is precisely fuguing, like a fuguing from, which always which implies always that movement. I think at some point I will make a difference between movement and constant movement. Precisely when we were editing the book, we were talking about, okay, but what is the difference between movement and constant movement? And for now, the answer is an equation, like a mathematical equation, which is in the book, which implies fugue, implies desire, implies everyday life. Those are the components. So that is also one of the mottos to go into that. And then the history of the mountains is precisely something that is pretty autobiographical in a way, because thinking from the Caribbean context, the insular and the continental, where the current emancipatory processes, if we try to trace them back, where they were reactivated, because the emancipatory processes, they never end and they never start, they are. But when was the last moment when they were reactivated in that context? And it was in the mountains through the maroon experience, through the fuging of the indigenous and African descendants from the plantation systems, fuging into the mountains. And in those kind of contexts in which you have to be in relation with all forms of life, then start to create something into emancipation that maybe I think is stuck nowadays in the creation of the nation states across the whole region, which was important in terms of the overcome the colonial and some neo-colonial logics in the region, but still is, I mean, the DR is a good example of that is not the device to go for it in these post-colonial societies.
So the flight of the slave people and slave populations into the mountain, and that form of refusal of a subjectivity that actually negated their humanity is at the basis of this search of yours for when you talk about the expansion of perceptual systems, right? In that view, from that imposition of body into labor, right? Then it's like what happens in that interconnectedness that will happen in in the practice of cimarronaje or marronage, but also in the configuration of moving communities, because we know that many of them would set up in a particular place, but inevitably always end up moving.
Yeah, and you pointed out something pretty important, which is it's a configuration of other subjectivities. Because of the enslavement process, the subjectivity was almost dry out of all these people. And through the fusion and in the mountains is where they are able to reconstruct or recreate, create another, a different subjectivity, departing from the previous one. There is a text that I wrote. It was it was published in June 2020. I think I finished writing. I started in 2019 and I finished it at the beginning of the pandemic. And I talk about that. It's like how that deconstruction of the subjectivity and then fusing as a way to construct in another way the subjectivity, and how we can bring the marronage experience in relation to evade any kind of cooptation of the subjectivity into our context nowadays is precisely in that way. It's like when we are almost in this kind of really cooptation of the desire and the vital force, as Sueli used to refer, is how we can feel and maybe now is not reconstruct or construct other subjectivities, but it's something in relation to the subjectivity.
And how do you feel that how do you make that possible in the context of the art world, which is constantly, which is built around today, right? In its many changing facets, but today is built around accumulation. One could say that there is something that the art world has inherited from that very early plantation system and imposition into a colonial framework of capital development. And so how do you negotiate that? Because there's this, I also then want to talk about how that fuging speaks to how you choose artwork and how you relate to artists, right? But perhaps before we move to that, I was just interested in how, because this view from subjectivity and the practice of emancipation and of freedom, right? Freedom is a constant struggle. How do you make that happen in the art world?
I think maybe one entry point is the kind of institutionalities that are supporting the project so far. It's like none of them are like these massive institutions from the art system. And also because there are many institutionalities involved in the project, I think it's a way to always, one thing is how the project was developed through Delfina Foundation, and one is through KADIST.
So that none of the institutions, let's say, own the entirety of the project, because the project just keeps spilling out and mutating and
it's
transforming.
It's like and also is I think the approach from the institutions are also more receptive in that way, because it's not like I don't own this, so it's like I can contribute with. So yeah, that is like the main question to that field. Come on. And then something which is pretty hard, really, is how, because also the art system is accumulation not only in material terms, but also like in symbolic terms.
Yeah.
And I am not only putting myself into this, I am also carrying a lot of artists and thinkers, and how I can take care as a curator, which is supposed to take care of those practices, of those people, of those all of forms of life. So it's like maybe I have to always really think a lot. And all these projects has been taking 2 years for San Francisco, 1 year and a half for San Francisco, 2 years for Delfina. It's like a really slow processes in order to really manage really listening to what the institutions are thinking, and like understanding their needs, and also really taking the time to talk with. And I think also something pretty important is that those institutionalities are like the people that made up those institutions is also key to be able to do that. It's like I think not because I am here in Lindsay and Joey are here, but it's like people that are really interested in being affected by these kind of things. So that makes the difference.
Can we move to talk? Oh, no, I was like, I didn't even notice something happened there. It went elsewhere. Okay. We'll be back. No, but could you talk about the process of choosing the artwork that you chose for each one of the rotations, the relationship between the artists and artworks you worked with for this rotation, or the San Francisco moment versus the Brazilian? Do you connect with a local community? Do you feel a commitment to always having the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean present, because it tends to get less attention in the art world, right, as historically?
Yeah, I think that is something that I've been thinking. Is like, wow, I am trying to play with so many things in the table, and all of them are there. But the main one is I really want to be interpolated by the context where the project is taking place. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense, like what is the idea of transmutation for the city where I live in Santiago is completely different to what maybe is transmutation in San Francisco or in Oakland or in Berkeley, or what is for Sao Paulo, for example, which is also the scales of the countries, of the cities is really massive. So
that your fugue is always site specific also.
Yeah, exactly. And because of that, it's always important, this research moment. That is really like a commitment with the context where the exhibition or the project will take place. Another one is how this project could be interesting and could facilitate a space and budget and like an infrastructure for artists that they are trying to do things and didn't manage to make it because of or like accessing to a studio, which is not necessarily through because of production. But that is the second one, I must to say. It's like I always do studio visits constantly, like as part of my life. And I am pretty bad with names, but I am pretty good with remembering. I remember that I talked with a person and we talk about this project, and like this is the moment maybe for call them and do something.
And were there any artists or artworks or performances or sound matters that you feel were like at the core with you as you did this long research for this project? You know,
That is a
because if one looks at all the three rotations just at KADIST, and one looks at what you did at Pivo, like there's so many artists, right? So I'm wondering if there was, we won't tell anyone that they're not the ones who get, you know, because I think everyone in their creative scholarly process, there's just something that tends to just like you going back to it because it's what reminds you of what it is you're trying to think about, you know? And so I was just curious.
But I must to say that the work by Jonas Van and Juno B, which was in Sao Paulo and in the rotation one.
Do you have an image of it by any chance?
Yeah, is the just pass. Is the one that has the that video? Yeah, that one which is over there. And there is also one still, I think so. No, because those are installation views. But yeah, Jonas and
you want to describe that video?
It's a beautiful video. It's a fiction depart from a real story, which is Boitatá, an entity for indigenous population in around Ceará in Brazil. And Boitatá is this guard kind of the Amazonia, of the Amazon. But also Boitatá is a kind of a portal for transformation. And then they go through it to talk about transformation through rehearsing certain acts to lose what made up us as women or men and really mutate in another kind of in this sense sexual identities. But the video is also rehearsing with the idea of repetition, with the idea of transmutation in itself. So it's not only, and that is across many of the artists involved in the project, like these things are not the topic of their practice, of their work. It's really something through like something that they go through it. And I was talking with Joey a few days ago that sometimes for the selection of the artists, it's not necessarily because of the work in itself, but it's because of the practice that they've been doing. So maybe, and I think that is something that I have to figure it out at some point, is because for sure for a wider audience, it could be hard to okay, but I am getting everything, but this not. And it's maybe because it's more about the practice of the artist and not necessarily about that particular piece. So Jonas and Juno. Then Yina Jiménez Suriel, which is an artist from the Dominican Republic, but living for more than 20 years in Mexico City. And actually, I was Madeline was probably one of the first person that I started to talk about the research back in 2019. And since then, we've been meeting through, I don't know, Zoom or when I go to Mexico. And we always go back into this. And then the piece by Duto Jardono, which was kind of a workshop through the project, because it's this performance that the artist is delivering the instructions to the performers, and in relation to variation and improvisation using 3 words as ready-made objects, which is in harmonia progressio. And then 3 groups of performers, they are playing with in harmonia progressio and moving in the space. And the idea is how they can be attuned to each other, to the ones in the small group and to the ones in the wider group. And it's the one that really made me always think about the possibilities of improvisation, which is like in a way into constant movement.
There's you use the word repetition and variation a number of times, right? And also you talk about relation, and I'm not a specialist in the Caribbean, but there are some people in this room who are specialists in the Caribbean. I'm looking at a number of them, but one of them is my colleague, Naila Dominguez, who's Cuban, and she will correct me if I misrepresent this. But these are terms that are so important in the history of Caribbean thought.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned glissant, right? But the idea of the archipelago and the question of repetition and of a somewhat unstable territory is part of the history of the Caribbean thinking about itself. And so I was wondering if you could talk about how that is present, even though your projects, as they pan out, are very, let's call them global, international, and are in constant fugue from being exclusively Caribbean. I feel that in their structure, because you're someone who thinks and operates structurally.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the way you told us about your lists, right? It's like, I don't know if it might be your architectural training.
It is.
You're fuging, but the form is so profoundly Caribbean.
Yeah,
of operating, So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was talking 2 weeks ago with met Tessa Mars, which is an artist from Haiti. And we are working on the axis of the ocean. And I was precisely saying that there is no chance for me to be able to think in the way that I think and do the things that I do right now if I am not being born and raised in this particular part of the world. Because that is like and I think it was with Cholet yesterday that I was saying how nowadays, even from multiculturalism until now, it's most about narrating things and go through a topic, and I mean that is a way, but for many people in the context as the Caribbean, this is really about how we can make life, so it's really because of that is the rehearsal and really going through it, because otherwise how you will be able to manage the things in that kind of colonial, post-colonial, neo-colonial the dynamics that you have in that context. So that is in one hand, and then thinking on Edward Glissant, but also Sylvia Winter, but also Juan Esteban Muñoz. In relation to the archipelagic, you have Benítez Rojo as well. So yeah, it's like a long tradition that for sure I belong to that. Maybe and I think it's because of architecture, for real. This approach and
it's like a few that always wants to get organized into like series, right? There's like series and sub-series and like sub-series, which is kind of funny. For the few.
And then this diagram is open in that direction and is open in this. Yeah, it's like have like a other two. So it's really. But yeah, it's completely informed by and going through it.
And before we open it up to the public that I'm sure has questions, I wanted to ask you, since I had kind of brought you back into the Caribbean, if you could share a little bit about the Emancipation Art School project that you have developed.
Yeah, well, that is actually another project to try to practice the things in the research. And it's been organized by Beatriz Santiago Muñoz, which is an artist based in Puerto Rico, in San Juan. Victor, Victor Rodriguez, which is also an artist and teacher in the Universidad de Puerto Rico, and Gina. And so the idea is becoming from the fact that there is no master degree kind of, but we are not looking for the master degree. We are looking for the environment that provide that kind of programs for the artists to think and to really go deeper into their practices. So that is like one thing. Another thing is how we can really collapse the pretty formal educations that most of the countries have until now, but also using those formal programs. Like we are trying to, I mean, we already have collaborations with the school, the art school in Puerto Rico, the art school in the public one in the Dominican Republic, another one in Colombia, and few other independent spaces across the insular Caribbean.
And so you build workshops, or you get artists together.
How
days a week studying together. What?
Yeah, how it's going now is through these small workshops of more or less 5-6 days together in one place. And it was actually to continue building the program, which is Ray, Rayon. And the website will be soon. And this September, we will have the first like a beta piloto project with the Universidad del Atlántico in Colombia, in Barranquilla. And the idea is it will have most local people because of budget. And then we are trying to bring in a few other people from the rest of the region. And they will be dealing with, the first of them should be the language, precisely. It's how we can communicate without going into translation for 5 languages, which is insane. So what are ways to communicate which is also something that used to be highlighted by the fact that no, it's a pretty fragmented region because even they talk exactly. So there are no ways for them to become together. But yeah, also like I was thinking on art and emancipation in this context, trying to really put into practice.
And what is the emancipation in that case? Emancipation from?
I think in this case, it's an emancipation from the way of thinking and the way of making art properly.
A kind of academic,
exactly,
driven or structured.
Yeah, because
disciplining of art practice.
And we think that through that, it will push in a way the reconfiguration of the art system in the region without us being in, because where those practitioners will be showing their works, in which ways they will be writing. So, and at some point, we will be so many people that the system will have to, break into those other ways of thinking, which is, and in that sense, if we think into the art system as a heritage of the colonial moment, is a way to making these fisuras in this colonial mentality in the region, because we cannot go for. Now we cannot go pretend that we will go into the public sphere, as I used to say, which is really where, these heavy discussions in relation to post-colonial societies and so on. But maybe facilitating these spaces and becoming this collective body is a way to contribute.
Because I think you said some of the musicians Some of the sound makers from Friday are here.
Yes.
Right? Hi. I wondered if you wanted, some of us were there, if you wanted to talk about how you worked on that together. And maybe just to describe it, I mean, I arrived and it had already started. But again, it was like in state, like KADIST is one space, but there were we kept moving. You weren't like in one place. There wasn't one person was sound. There was like one station and another station and another station, and there were 7, I guess, right? Or 6, 7, and they seemed to one moment versus another seemed to oscillate between something very electronic driven and something where there was an instrument of some kind intervened, never as when you look at the instrument, not what you think it's going to sound like, but something else, right? So the instrument itself is like fuging from its own history, right? And modality of making sound. But so I wondered if you wanted to just talk a little bit about the inclusion of that. You know, you have the exhibition has rotated, and then and then also you invite into like a gathering. It was packed. It was so full of people, right? A lot of people. For us to kind of like move and inhabit this place with this mutating and changing soundscape that was very trance-like in that kind of. I do not mean to offend any of the sound makers, if that's not how they would describe their own. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, maybe I can.
Because it was really interesting. It became another place. It became another exhibition. It like the artwork that was there, supposedly holding the exhibition, suddenly was somewhat irrelevant, or not. But sometimes you would turn around, you're like, oh yeah, I have this behind me, but I'm here experiencing this in my body. It was a very embodied moment.
Maybe I can give a general view, and then Shole can tell us about your impressions in taking part in. In the show in Brazil, we commissioned a piece, a sound piece, to one of the main Dominican dembow producers, which is pretty famous. And but I managed to commission the piece, and we posicionado, we located, exactly, we positioned the piece in this kind of hall among in Brazil, the exhibition space was massive, like probably 10 times the space that we have in Cadiz. So and it was completely dark, kind of. It was just this transitory space. And when you were walking by to reach out the other piece that was there, then you will perceive the sound, exactly. And it's becoming from this idea of the intention of making these relationships is through sound, it's because of sound. And even if the whole project is not about sound, but is like a sound is a key thing. So in Brazil, that happened, and something that was taking place is that when people went through the hall, they were dancing. No, it's like even I have a video which is really beautiful. Felipe, which is one of the mediators in Pivot, and he didn't know that we installed the piece and that piece will be there. And he was walking by during finishing the installation. And apparently he listened the piece and he started to dance. And I have that short video. So then when I came to Cadiz, that was already there. It's like or either we commission a sound piece, or are we having the same sound piece? For me, it doesn't make sense.
So sound as relation, as what enables the relation or makes it possible.
Exactly, and it's also because my approach to the exhibition space is in this relational way. It's like something that I really like of the exhibition space is that you can really build things and people and living beings in relation through that space. And maybe sound, it's been the main one because it's also that, as you said, it's pretty embodied. And you don't need to mediate so much, let's say. So that was in mind. I came for the research in April the past year, and one of the people that I visited was Cone-shaped Top in Oakland, and it was supposed to be just 1 hour, and we stayed the whole afternoon talking and talking and talking. And Cone-shaped Top is led by two artists, with Kat and Matt. And Kat is actually United States Filipino. So when we were mainly talking about the underground scene in Manila. So yeah, long story short, from there it started this idea that they were telling me about the Cicada series. And they gave me these interviews that few months after I started to look at it. But I, like at that moment, I already felt that no, we have to do something, and we don't need to do the commission piece. We should invite them to make something that will be really valuable for them, for their community, and also can be sustainable or contribute to the sustainability of the Cone-shaped project in itself. So that is like the general idea. And then, yeah, Shule, you can tell it.
Hi. So I think that hearing about your process, and we've spoken for, as you said, maybe last year and such, it really felt so much thinking about your questions. It really felt so much that, in a way, that relational aspect of your process and curation and research and pedagogy and how something comes to be felt very much so, to me at least, mirrored in what Cone-shaped Top was doing during the pandemic. They started to commission a series of audio pieces from different sound artists, from musicians, and it became a whole series. And then eventually it was published with, Yina and KADIST and Sing books. So that evening we were invited, and it felt very much for the spirit of it too. Cone-shaped Top offered to all of us, and whoever of us were available and able to. Most of us were like, let's do this. And so it was pretty amazing because, it was 7 performers with a lot of audio gear, acoustic gear in the space. Lindsay was coming around just saying, the wires, and it's mind-boggling. But so that does take up space. But there were so many people who came. And I think in that way, that relational aspect of it also became mirrored in the way that Cone-shaped Top approached it as well, through those conversations, and the way that we were there in the space. So suddenly, yes, it's not a gallery space that you have a lot of physical space between you, right, and someone else, where you normally would have a huge buffer of space at a gallery or a museum. It's weird, you don't pack in there together. But suddenly everyone was sharing the space and really engaging within a gallery space in a way that perhaps normally would not. Sitting on the floor, laying down, getting artworks, not damaging them. And this doesn't really usually happen in that space. And so as a performer too, it felt like that whole process was then mirrored in this relationship between whoever's there in the space, between all of us in the space, and as a performer as well, sort of situating myself in the space around artworks, someone who also makes visual works, and finding my relationship to it through time, but also through being with everyone else as well. And I think a number of the sets, not all of us, but I think a number of us work somewhat improvisationally as well, or a mix. And I think that also is such a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And even when you have this diagram and sub-axis and so on, I really want to go always through trust on trust on the institutions. I am kind of picky also, when I accept the invitations, so I can. so trusting on the institutions, trusting on the people that work there. And if I, when I invited ConeShape Top, we meet 3 times. And then it's because it's their project. And they are joining this, or maybe the montañas is joining them. But it's not that Yina, because it's my curatorship project, I have to be. No, it's so it's also yeah.
And what place does the publication, you're wanting to put together pieces that, because it is not a catalog.
No.
It's a series of translations from, major thinkers. Denetem Tuambona, who's Franco-African, Sueli Rolnik, who's a Brazilian psychoanalyst, Denetem is a philosopher and curator, Ailton Krenak, who's an indigenous leader and writer in Brazil. It's it's a group of seemingly other disparate texts, but in all of them there is a work around emancipation, and the deep belief that art is
a way
tool for emancipation, right? So can you talk a little bit?
In one image we will look at 2 photos, one in orange and the other one in white, because the publication, this is the volume 2 of the publication. And for me, it's been probably one of the most important aspects of the project, is how I can also displace myself from the research in itself. And in which sense? It's all those texts, or either those thinkers, they've been thanks to them, I've been able to articulate the ideas of the research in the way that I am doing now. And compiling them is a way for me to open access, the access to those ideas or to those thinkers.
So it's the bibliography.
Exactly. So you don't have to talk with Yina if you want to go through this, or if you are already into this, into that path, you can go for it, continue your journey by yourself. So that is really an important aspect. And also I have the possibility, the capability to at least read and understand in 4 languages. And because of that, I've been able to read many or listen many talks by those people. But when I then go into the studio visits or talk with people involved in the project or not, and I want to refer them to you should read this text, or you should look at this talk. I should, but it's just in Spanish, or it's just in French, or it's just in English or Portuguese. So that came to me talking with Ana Roman, which was the curator in Pivot at that moment. It's you know what, let's do a publication. So and it was in part translating most of those essays for the first time into other languages, putting them public through digital. The digital version is completely free, and sometimes commission new essays to also include it. And though all of them are in a way or another thinking in or either freedom or emancipation. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions from I know we have taken over, but there is time for questions from the public. If anyone has any questions or comments.
I can start with a question and then people now. Thank you very much. This is an amazing project. You make a lot of emphasis on the history of the mountains and the importance of this history for your project. You connected with Marronash, Quilombos, Palenques. Yeah. But I am wondering if there is also a history of the islands for the project, for the way that you conceptualize, exhibition. So this is an invitation to think about island, which is a very important, it's a key word
In your title. Yeah.
And just talk a little bit about this issue.
Yeah, the island is, it could be understood as imaginations for me. And imaginations in itself, in the research, is like structures to manage life. I don't like the term manage, but that is the one that I have for now. So yeah, the islands in that sense is like those structures symbolically or materially that the desire or the vital force is building for us to inhabit them. So yeah, I think that is my main thinking in relation to.
And how do those islands that kind of manage and congeal, or not congeal, but bring together the forces of desire linked to all those islands where
because actually
the island that you were born in and that surrounds you.
Because actually the island, in terms of geological perspective, is really is an idea conditioned because of the domestication of our senses. Actually, there are no islands. I mean, if we were able to really inhabit the whole planet, we will realize that all of them are connected. So this idea of the insularity through this geographical space is, yeah, it's like I think we can move forward in that sense because it's really a reflection of our incapability to perceive in other ways that create that idea of, I don't know, this is just, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But actually that island is completely linked to the north of Colombia through Beata Ridge, which is one of the main underwater ridge in the Atlantic Ocean. So yeah, it's like in the other
either
project,
there are no islands or there are only islands.
Exactly. It's
of
like
different sizes.
Yeah, and the ocean is who decide really like the configuration of those geographical spaces.
And yet you choose no islands and islands, but yet also to go, to push with what Daila is, I think, opened is that so islands are not islands because they're actually linked to other land masses and forms that we just are not able to perceive because we're so subjected by visuality and the visual, right? Since we don't see it, and that's the only thing we see, that's what we'll name. And yet at the same time, you choose that word to designate what will the kind of coming together of the forces of desire.
Yeah, because something that is really like a real potential in the island idea is that because of that, like como la interconexión que va y viene, como, the compass in the interconnection with the other spaces generates the condition to create really particular living beings. And that's what the desire is making on us. It's like really pushing for our subjectivities to become as much weird as possible in order to evade that kind of cooptation. And yeah, the islands are always, like a pushing in that way. We were just talking about the south center of the island by Haiti and the Dominican Republic used to be an island not so long time ago. And because of that, is one of the most biodiversity places in the American continent. And, but now is like those living beings are filtrating in the rest of the island. And they are also pushing to other living beings, for transmutation, for other kinds of relationships. So yeah, it's really the island as a concept or as an equal for imagination is really like a really potential, departure point of departure.
Other questions? I wonder if you could say something about the title. Where did that title come from? De montañas, submarinas, el fuego, hace, islas.
Well, I can really intellectualize them from where it come, or I can be pretty honest.
You can be pretty honest.
Yeah, right. Actually, I was reading a series of a compilation of the Félix Servio Ducudray, which is one of the authors in the Reader. It was a compilation of texts that he wrote.
Who is it?
Okay, Félix Servio Ducudray was a writer and lawyer and politician, actually. He was exiled during the first dictatorship in the Dominican Republic to Cuba, and then was able to come back. And for some weird reason that I still don't know, he was joining the first scientific expedition of Dominican scientists, expeditions across the whole island.
This is in the 19th century.
That is in 1970, 1960, 1980s. And then something that Felix was doing was like writing those short articles that will be published weekly in a national newspaper. And at some point, the family decided to compile all of them. And I was reading a lot because it's a really poetical way to approach science. And I always think on science as a way to storytell, to storytelling ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think Félix Servio really managed to have it. And then I was reading a lot, and at some point I was talking with my mom. It was during the night, and we were talking about these things of like a listening on tales from my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And then during at some point in my dreams, I wake up and I say, the montañas, submarinas, el fuego, hace, islas. I don't know how I made the connections, but it was really like that, pretty random way. And I remember that I was thinking to put it in past, like islas. Mm-hmm. And then I spoke to my mom and talked to Pablo Guardiola in the Dominican, in San Juan, and to Yina Jiménez Suriel, and it's hace, islas. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's definitely there. And also, the whole project for me is in the title. Mm-hmm. Like the geological aspect of it, the underground ideas of something that is becoming, but you don't know exactly, mm-hmm. So yeah, it's.
And one of these texts.
Yeah. It's it's a beautiful text about the creation of an island, actually, the Cabritos Island, which is an island in the middle of a lake in the DR. And he's describing that geological process of creating this new imagination, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, comments? Gina's going back to the DR. Now or whenever she comes back. Maybe we'll leave it at that. Unless, is there something else you want to, that you feel we didn't talk about that you really wanted to talk about?
Oh, I think we cover
a lot. Yeah. Thank you, Yina. Thank you, everyone.